October 25th, 1944, 6:47 a.m. Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague stood on the deck of the escort carrier, USS Fanshawe Bay, when his lookout screamed something no American naval commander expected to hear at this stage of the war. Pagoda masts on the horizon, pagoda masts. The unmistakable silhouette of Japanese battleships. Sprague grabbed his binoculars. His blood ran cold. It wasn't one battleship. It was 4, plus 6 heavy cruisers, plus more destroyers than he could quickly count. And they were less than 20 miles away, steaming at attack speed directly toward his formation. Here's why MacArthur and Nimitz almost destroyed each other. Sprague commanded 6 escort carriers converted from merchant hulls. Thin, slow ships with cargo ship diesel engines. Maximum armament, 5-inch guns. Between him and 130,000 American soldiers on Leyte's beaches stood only his small escort force. On the other side, Yamamoto, the largest battleship ever built by humanity. 65,000 tons, 18.1-inch guns that fired 3,200-pound shells out to 25 miles. Think about that. Yamato's shells weighed more than a complete car, each shot. Sprague shouted to his communications officer, "Where the hell is Task Force 34? Where are Halsey's fast battleships?" The answer that came back was worse than any Japanese attack could be. "Sir, Halsey is 400 miles north. He took the entire fleet." In that moment, Clifton Sprague understood something terrible. The greatest threat to American victory in the Pacific wasn't coming from Tokyo. It was coming from Washington. America had built the most powerful fleet in history, but that fleet had 2 heads that refused to speak to each other. And now, the wrong head was in the wrong place. The Japanese hadn't planned this. They didn't need to. The rivalry between MacArthur and Nimitz had done their job for them. Yamamoto's plan, well, technically Toyota's plan, but you get the clickbait reference, was about to succeed, not because of Japanese brilliance, but because America was fighting itself. To understand how America almost lost its greatest naval victory, you need to understand a decision made 2 years earlier, 7,000 miles away, in Washington, D.C., March 31st, 1942. President Franklin Roosevelt signed an order dividing the Pacific into 2 completely separate theaters of operation. General Douglas MacArthur would command the Southwest Pacific area. Admiral Chester Nimitz would command the Pacific Ocean areas. 2 commands, 2 chiefs, 2 chains of authority that terminated at different points on the globe. This violated the most fundamental principle of warfare, unity of command. Every officer at West Point learns this in the first week. Every naval academy in the world teaches the same thing: 1 battlefield, 1 commander. But America had a problem that no military principle could solve. Douglas MacArthur. MacArthur couldn't be subordinated to any admiral. His seniority was absolute. His political influence was immense. He had loyal followers in Congress, in the press, among veterans. Confronting him publicly was political suicide. Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, made it absolutely clear: no naval forces would ever be placed under Army command. So Washington chose the easier solution. Choose nothing. Let both men command their own wars. MacArthur would advance through New Guinea. Nimitz would island hop across the Central Pacific. Both would reach Japan. Somehow this would work, except it didn't. In October 1944, when America invaded the Philippines at Leyte Gulf, this divided command structure created an absurd situation. Vice Admiral Thomas Kinkaid commanded the 7th Fleet, protecting the invasion. But Kinkaid didn't answer to any admiral. He answered to MacArthur, who was on solid ground in Australia. Meanwhile, Admiral William "Bull" Halsey commanded the 3rd Fleet, which was supposed to support the operation. But Halsey didn't answer to MacArthur. He answered to Nimitz, who was in Pearl Harbor, thousands of miles away. No single American naval officer commanded all naval forces in the area. Worse still, MacArthur forbade Kinkaid from communicating directly with Nimitz or Halsey. All messages had to pass through a radio station on Manus Island. During the battle, that station became completely backlogged. Critical messages took 2 hours or more to be delivered. 2 hours. In naval combat, that's an eternity. The two fleets only knew what the other was doing by intercepting each other's communications. Like two football teams playing on the same field, but pretending the other team doesn't exist. MacArthur himself, years later, admitted, of all the faulty decisions of war, perhaps the most unexplainable one was the failure to unify the command in the Pacific. But in October 1944, as American soldiers landed at Leyte, nobody had fixed this problem, and the Japanese were about to exploit this flaw in a way that nearly destroyed the American fleet. August 1944. Tokyo. Admiral Suemu Toyoda, commander of the combined fleet, stared at maps of the strategic situation. The news wasn't good. The Imperial Navy had lost 4 carriers at the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June. Along with them went most of the experienced pilots. Japanese naval aviation was dead. The remaining carriers were empty hulls with inexperienced crews. But the Japanese still had one card: surface force, battleships, cruisers, destroyers. Ships that could fight with their main gun turrets. Toyota conceived a desperate plan. He called it Operation Shogo, Victory. It was an ironic name. Nobody in the room believed they would have victory. The goal was to cause enough damage to force the Americans to negotiate, rather than demand unconditional surrender. The plan was simple in conception, insane in execution. The Japanese would divide their forces into 3 groups. To the north, Admiral Jisaburo Osawa would sail with the remaining carriers. His mission: be the bait, lure the American fleet away from Leyte. Through the center, Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita would transit San Bernardino Strait with the most powerful force: 4 battleships, including Yamato and Musashi, 6 heavy cruisers, 11 destroyers. From the south, Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura would enter through Surigao Strait with 2 older battleships and 4 destroyers. If everything worked, if the carriers could draw American attention, Kurita would emerge into Leyte Gulf unopposed. And then his 18 warships would fall upon the American invasion transports, like wolves on a flock of sheep. Ozawa understood his function perfectly. When American interrogators asked after the war if he expected to save any carriers, he answered without hesitation, "We expected complete destruction." It was a suicide mission, and it was the only part of the Japanese plan that would work perfectly. Here's what's fascinating. There's no evidence that Japanese planners specifically identified the MacArthur-Nimitz command split as a vulnerability. When interrogated, Kurita admitted he didn't even know who commanded the American task forces. The American command chaos that nearly doomed the invasion was a serendipitous bonus. American institutional dysfunction compounding Japanese tactical success. The command crisis at Leyte Gulf crystallized in 3 radio transmissions. Each one exposes a different layer of systemic failure. October 24th, 3:12 p.m. Halsey transmitted a preparatory order listing which ships will be formed as Task Force 34 under Vice Admiral Willis Lee to create a surface battle line. The message was addressed to his subordinates, with information copies to Nimitz and King. Crucially, Kinkaid's 7th Fleet intercepted the message but wasn't a direct addressee. Here's the fatal problem. Halsey intended "will be formed" as future tense, a contingency plan he would execute if needed. But Nimitz at Pearl Harbor, King in Washington, and Kinkaid at Leyte all read it as present tense, concluding that Task Force 34 had been formed and was guarding San Bernardino Strait. Halsey sent a clarifying voice radio message at 5:10 p.m., stating the force would be formed when directed by me, but voice radio had limited range and never reached 7th Fleet. He never sent a follow-up telegram. Think about that. A grammatical difference, present versus future, is versus will be. That difference nearly cost the war. October 25th, 8:22 a.m. When Kurita's battleships appeared off Samar, Kinkaid finally grasped the truth. Nobody was guarding the strait. He transmitted in plain language, foregoing encryption to save time. My situation is critical. Fast battleships and support by airstrikes may be able to keep enemy from destroying CVES and entering Leyte. Earlier messages pleaded, request Lee proceed top speed cover Leyte and fast battleships urgently needed immediately at Leyte Gulf. Due to communication backlogs, Halsey didn't receive the critical message until approximately 10 a.m., nearly 2 hours after transmission, when his escort carriers were already fighting for survival. 2 hours, men were dying, ships were sinking, and the message requesting help was stuck in a radio queue on Manus Island, October 25th, 9:44 a.m. Philippine time. Nimitz, genuinely confused about Task Force 34's location, sent what he intended as a simple query. The transmitted text included standard encryption padding, nonsense phrases added to thwart Japanese codebreakers. Turkey trots to water, GG from SINCPAC action, Com 3rd Fleet info comment, CTF 77X. Where is RPT? Where is Task Force 34? RR, the world wonders. Halsey's communications staff correctly stripped the front padding, Turkey trots to water, but left the world wonders because it seemed contextually appropriate after the question. The phrase echoed Tennyson's poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, that doomed cavalry charge, and it arrived on the 90th anniversary of the Battle of Balaclava. Halsey received, Where is RPT? Where is Task Force 34? The world wonders. His reaction was volcanic. I was stunned as if I had been struck in the face. The paper rattled in my hands. I snatched off my cap, threw it on the deck, and shouted something I'm ashamed to remember. He broke into sobs of rage. Chief of Staff Rear Admiral Robert Carney grabbed him by the shoulders and shouted, Stop it! What the hell's the matter with you? Pull yourself together. Think about this. The commander of the most powerful fleet in the Pacific was crying on the deck while a decisive battle was happening 400 miles away. Not because of an order, because of encryption padding that wasn't properly removed. This is what the MacArthur Nimitz rivalry had created. A command structure so broken that critical communications became weapons against themselves. Vice Admiral Thomas Kinkaid was everything MacArthur and Nimitz were not. Pragmatic, discreet, and desperately trying to do his job despite an insane command structure. Kinkaid commanded the 7th Fleet, officially known as MacArthur's Navy. It was a strange fleet, composed primarily of amphibious ships, escort carriers, and older support vessels. It didn't have the fast battleships or the big fleet carriers from Nimitz's main force. But the really strange part? Kinkaid was a Navy admiral, but he answered to an Army general who was on solid ground. Technically, he couldn't give direct orders to Halsey, even though Halsey was operating in the same area of operations. All coordination had to pass through official channels, which meant hours of delay. On the morning of October 24th, Kinkaid intercepted Halsey's message about Task Force 34. He breathed a sigh of relief. The fast battleships would guard San Bernardino. His lighter fleet could concentrate on supporting the invasion and dealing with the threat coming from the south through Surigao Strait. On the night of October 24th, 7th Fleet completely destroyed Nishimura's southern Japanese force at Surigao Strait. It was the last time battleship battle lines faced each other in naval history. The old American battleships, Pearl Harbor survivors like USS West Virginia and USS Tennessee, crossed the T of the Japanese formation and annihilated it. Kinkaid felt confident, one threat eliminated, the other threat blocked by Halsey to the north, except Halsey wasn't north of San Bernardino Strait. Halsey was 400 miles north, chasing Japanese carriers. At 4:12 a.m. on October 25th, a 7th Fleet patrol pilot spotted Kurita's force emerging from San Bernardino Strait. The report reached Kincaid at 4:30 a.m. Kincaid didn't panic immediately. He assumed that Lee's Task Force 34 was dealing with it. The American fast battleships would crush Kurita before he got anywhere near Leyte's beaches. He sent a message to Halsey. Is TF-34 guarding San Bernardino Strait? At 7 a.m., he sent another. Enemy BBS and cruisers reported firing on TG 77.4.3 from 15 miles astern. Request immediate strike by fast carriers. Halsey's response arrived at 8:30 a.m. Task Force 34 wasn't guarding the strait. It was with Halsey. 400 miles north, Kincaid understood. He was alone. 6 escort carriers, some destroyers, and destroyer escorts facing 4 Japanese battleships, including Yamato. He sent the message in plain language. My situation is critical. And then he waited. Because there was nothing else he could do. America's command structure had put an admiral in the wrong place, answering to the wrong person, with no authority to give orders to the forces that could save him. This is what the MacArthur Nimitz rivalry had created. A Navy admiral who couldn't talk to another Navy admiral because one answered to an Army general and the other answered to a different Navy admiral thousands of miles away. The Japanese didn't need to be brilliant strategists. American organizational dysfunction was doing their work for them. 6:45 a.m., October 25th, 1944. 20 miles off the island of Samar. What stood between Kurita's 23 warships and catastrophe was Rear Admiral Clifton Ziggy Sprague's Taffy 3, 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. The force comparison was shocking. Japanese, 4 battleships including Yamato and Nagato, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 11 destroyers. Heaviest gun, 18.1 inches. Taffy. 3, 6 escort carriers converted from merchant hulls, 3 destroyers, 4 destroyer escorts. Heaviest gun, 5 inches. Maximum speed, 18 knots versus 30-plus knots Japanese. Yamato alone, at 65,000 tons, weighed more than the entire American formation. A single one of her main turrets weighed more than the largest American destroyer present. Sprague did the only things he could do, ordered his carriers to run toward a nearby rain squall for cover. Launched every available aircraft with whatever armament they had, and did something no naval manual would recommend. He ordered his destroyers to attack. Commander Ernest Evans of USS Johnston didn't wait for the order. When he saw the pagoda masts, he ordered flank speed, turned directly toward the Japanese fleet, and opened fire at 10 miles distance. Johnston was firing at targets that weighed 20 times more, but Evans was a Cherokee and Comanche officer who had told his crew at commissioning, "This is a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way. If anyone doesn't want to come along, get off now." Nobody got off. Johnston fired her torpedoes at 6 miles. One hit heavy cruiser Kumano, blowing off her bow. Then, 3 18-inch shells from Yamato hit Johnston. One explosion tore off Evans's fingers. Another destroyed half his guns. Evans applied makeshift tourniquets to his mutilated fingers, waited 10 minutes while emergency repairs were made, and returned to the fight. He single-handedly attacked a light cruiser and 4 destroyers. When Johnston finally sank at 10 a.m., Japanese destroyer Captain Kokichi Terauchi ordered his crew to salute the survivors in the water. Evans, posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, was never seen again. Destroyer USS Hull was hit on the bridge early, but kept fighting. She fired torpedoes at battleships Kongo and Yamato. Those torpedoes forced Yamato and Kurita aboard to turn away for 20 critical minutes, removing the Japanese commander from tactical control. Hull absorbed over 40 shell hits before sinking with 253 of 327 crew. Destroyer escort USS Samuel B. Roberts, the smallest warship to charge battleships, raised steam pressure to 660 pounds per square inch, beyond safe limits to achieve 28.7 knots. Then engaged heavy cruiser Chikuma at such close range, the enemy's guns couldn't depress enough to hit her. Roberts fired over 600 5-inch rounds, exhausting all ammunition, including training rounds and star shells, before Congo's 14-inch shells destroyed her. Aircraft from all three Taffy groups, many armed only for ground support with machine guns and depth charges, attacked continuously. Pilots made dry runs after exhausting ammunition, simply to distract Japanese gunners. One pilot dropped a depth charge down a cruiser's smokestack. Escort carrier USS Gambier Bay, the only U.S. carrier ever lost to surface gun fire, absorbed 8-inch shells from heavy cruiser Chikuma, starting at 8:10 a.m. By 9:07 a.m., she was rolling over and sinking, and then, at 9:20 a.m., with victory within reach, Kurita ordered, "All ships my course north, speed 20. He was approximately 25 miles from Leyte Gulf. Victory, or at least devastating destruction of transports and landing beaches, was perhaps 90 minutes away. Why did he turn? Kurita offered multiple explanations in post-war interrogations, none entirely satisfactory. Exhaustion. He hadn't slept in 3 days. His flagship had been torpedoed beneath him 2 days earlier. Lost tactical control. Evasive maneuvers had scattered his fleet across the sea. Misidentification. He believed he faced fleet carriers and cruisers, not escort carriers and destroyers. Fear of air attack. In the narrow confines of Leyte Gulf, I couldn't use the advantage that ships have of maneuvering. Fuel concerns. High-speed combat had consumed precious fuel. Fellow Japanese officers accused him of cowardice. Historian Mark Steele offers a different interpretation. The man ultimately responsible for ordering his force to carry out the act of idiocy of entering the Gulf 4 days after the American invasion force had already departed, declined to sacrifice his men for no other purpose than to uphold the Imperial Navy's peculiar brand of honor. Of all the Japanese command decisions of the battle, Kurita's was the most courageous. American casualties off Samar. 1,161 killed and missing, 913 wounded. Ships sunk. Escort carriers Gambier Bay and St. Lo, the latter to the first organized kamikaze attack. Destroyers Johnston and Hole. Destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts. Over 1,200 survivors floated for 2 days before rescue, enduring shark attacks and exposure. Japanese losses. 3 heavy cruisers sunk, multiple ships damaged, over 2,700 casualties. While Taffy 3 fought for survival, Halsey's fast battleships, the most powerful surface force in the Pacific, accomplished nothing. His carrier aircraft sank Ozawa's sacrificial carriers, completing their mission as decoys, but the battleships he'd taken north spent about half a day steaming north to engage the Japanese force, and half a day steaming south to engage another, but in the end did not fire a shot at either. Critics dubbed it the Battle of Bull's Run. Task Force 34's 6 fast battleships were 400-plus miles north when Taffy 3 was fighting. At 10:51 a.m., Halsey finally ordered them south, but destroyers needed refueling first, adding 2.5 hours of delay. When they finally reached San Bernardino Strait, Kurita had already escaped. The most powerful American surface force of the war had been successfully decoyed away from the decisive engagement. The Battle of Leyte Gulf remains the largest naval engagement in history. America won, barely, but victory came despite the command structure, not because of it. Remarkably, no major structural changes followed Leyte Gulf. The divided command between MacArthur and Nimitz persisted through war's end. No court-martial or formal investigation examined Halsey's decision. Nimitz's private assessment was damning. In a message to Admiral King, "It never occurred to me that Halsey, knowing the composition of the ships in the Sibuyan Sea, would leave San Bernardino Strait unguarded." He called Taffy 3's survival nothing short of special dispensation from the Lord Almighty. MacArthur was, beside himself, with fury, according to his chief of staff, charging Halsey with failure to execute his mission of covering the Leyte operations. General MacArthur repeatedly stated that Halsey should be relieved. Admiral William Leyte, Roosevelt's chief military advisor, offered the bluntest verdict. "We did not lose the war on account of it, but I don't see why we didn't. I thought we were going to." Halsey started a little war of his own. Halsey himself, in his 1947 memoir, conceded the fundamental problem. If we had been under the same command, with a single system of operational control and intelligence, the Battle of Leyte Gulf might have been fought differently, to a different result. Here's the truth the title promises: America's greatest vulnerability was itself. Japanese planners didn't need to identify the MacArthur Nimitz command split as a weakness. American institutional dysfunction exploited itself. A message meant as a contingency was read as a commitment. Desperate pleas took 2 hours to deliver. Padding on an encrypted query humiliated a fleet commander to tears. The tin cans of Taffy 3 fought one of history's most heroic actions, not because American strategy required such sacrifice, but because two rival bureaucracies, each protecting its institutional prerogatives, created a gap that only extraordinary courage could fill. Fleet Admiral Nimitz called Taffy 3's survival divine intervention. Historian Samuel Eliot Morison declared, "In no engagement of its entire history has the United States Navy shown more gallantry, guts, and gumption than in those 2 morning hours, between 0730 and 0930 off Samar." Both assessments are true, but neither should obscure the uglier truth. Those men died, and many more nearly died, because America couldn't solve a simple, organizational problem. Who was in command? MacArthur and Nimitz almost destroyed each other. Yamamoto's plan, Toyota's plan, almost worked, not because of Japanese genius, but because America was fighting itself.